Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Let's make another lure. Today I had an idea for a hybrid kind of blade bait, but not really a blade bait. I want it to be sort of a combination lipless crankbait and blade bait. So it'll be made out of two materials. There'll be a metal piece down the middle, and then there'll be the wooden body that actually will form the lure itself. And I'll explain it a little better on the dry erase board. But for those of you who are new to the channel, my name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer and lure maker, and an avid fisherman. And I make these videos to share some of the techniques that I've learned and come up with along the way, and to add a little bit of physics and engineering to the art of lure making. So here's a little concept drawing. Hopefully it starts to make a little sense when you look at this. So imagine this outer perimeter is all metal. And the inner body shape is actually made out of wood, and will have a nice lipless crankbait sort of shape. So if you were to look at it straight in onto the face, the cross section would look something like this. And so the wooden body will actually sandwich in the metal plate. That means I'm going to have to make this thing using the clamshell method that I've used on some of the balsa lures I've made recently. So to be able to hang the hardware, the actual hooks, I'll drill holes in the metal plate, one down here where this bulbs out, and one down here for the belly and the tail treble hooks. And then to tie on, I'm going to have multiple holes. This way, by changing on which one of these eyes I actually tie on, I can change the action of the lure. So I'll be making the lure out of two different materials, right? It'll be metal and wood. Deciding on which material to use was really more about what I had laying around. And for the wood, I wanted to use something that was dense, really hard. Although I'm going to have to add weight. I don't want to have to add too much weight because it's just going to complicate the build with the metal being sandwiched by the body. So I'm going to use this stuff. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to tell on camera what kind of wood this is, but it's actual bamboo. This is solid 5/8 inch bamboo flooring. I had it left over from when I did my house. So this will be hard and dense enough. And as far as the metal, I was considering using the stainless steel I had laying around, or some scrap aluminum I also had laying around. I've used this before, but I had this scrap piece of brass that's just the right thickness and pretty much just the right size. So I'm going to go with the brass. Brass is easy to cut, it's not too hard to drill a hole in, and it's tough enough that it won't bend easy or have the hook eyes rip real easy. So before I can actually draw this out, let's get some dimensions on here. I'm going to make the metal part 2 inches tall, the wooden part about 1.5 inches. The overall length will be 3¼ inch long, while the length of the wooden body will be right at 3 inches. Draw the whole thing on this piece of brass I'm going to use, but I'm going to use some blue painter's tape to just make it a lot easier. And now I'm doing my best to just reproduce what I put on the dry erase board without getting too fussy about it. Alright, that's close enough, and I'll refine it as I shape it out. And I'm going to start off with these snips, and then as I get closer to the line, I'll use a sander and a grinder and maybe my Dremel tool. Alright, that's got it pretty close. Let's go out to the disc sander and try to get it a little closer. I'm going to use this little mini die grinder with this grinder head that has a few different radiuses. This way I can get into these tight spots. Alright, well, the rest I'm going to do by eye with sandpaper and a couple of files and my little mini rotary tool. We'll get it refined enough so I can then polish it and it'll have a nice shine to it. But before I put too much attention on getting this brass all nicely refined, I want to go ahead and start working on the wood. So I'm going to pull off this tape and we'll put it on our piece of wood. and then we'll temporarily glue these two together so we can get started shaping. And I'm going to use some of this spray adhesive. It's easy to use, it sets really quick, and it's easy to pull it apart later. I'll let it set up just about 3 or 4 minutes and then put them together. Now I can go back to the bandsaw and cut out that inner shape. I'm just going to sketch in what I think is going to be a good contour line. And I'll cut that out so I'll have a general shape for the lure. Then it's just a matter of rounding everything off and making it look a little more natural. This is a bit of a block. Alright, I hope you can see it's starting to take on a little bit of a fish-like look. I got a bunch more to do, so I'm going to keep working on this, get it close enough where all I have to do is some finish sanding, and then I'll get back to you and show you what it looks like. Alright, it's getting there, getting pretty close to the smoothness and symmetry that I need to have on this thing. I will say bamboo is hard, man. It'll sand smooth, but it's very porous, but it's hard. It's a weird kind of wood. But I guess bamboo is actually a grass. So it's starting to take some shape. And some of you might be wondering why I would make a lure like this. It doesn't really seem like a good Florida lure. Well, when I was in Oregon last fall, a friend of the family asked me if I would make them a trolling lure to troll for deep water lake trout. And of course, since I know so much about deep water lake trout, living in Florida and all, I said yes. I have no idea if this is going to work for what he wants, but it's going to have flash. It'll have a nice tight movement, I hope. And I think it should be right about the right size. And as far as the depth, you'll be able to control the depth with this, with the amount of line you have out and how fast you move the boat. So hopefully he'll actually catch a fish on this thing. All right, well, weight and balance is not going to be a big deal. I just want it to sink relatively quickly. I'm going to go ahead and work out the density of the bamboo. I went ahead and cut a little cube. I'm going to go ahead and measure it, find out the volume, and then weigh it. And this way I'll have the density of it. All right, I went ahead and worked out the volume. It's 4.41 cubic centimeters. Now I just need to get the weight of the little cube, and it's 2.65 grams. So I'll divide the weight, 2.65, by the volume, 4.41. All right, and the answer is a clean 0.6 grams per cubic centimeter. The lure body weighs 13.94 grams. If I divide it by the density, which is 0.6, I get 23.23 cubic centimeters. That means the lure with all the hardware, the metal plate, the hooks and everything, has to weigh more than 23.23 grams to be able to start sinking. But I want it to sink faster than just that amount of weight will make it. So I'm going to add 20% to that total weight, and that should be right about 28 grams. Should give me plenty of weight for this thing to go down. So that means that the lure body, the brass plate, and the two hooks should weigh right around 28 grams. I've got 27 right here. So I'm going to add 1 gram of weight close to the nose and probably kind of high on the body. All right, let's go ahead and separate these two halves of this lure body. It should slide right off pretty easy. Not super easy. Oh man, not that easy. There it goes. All right. So the tricky part is going to be assembling this thing and having the body halves nicely aligned. So I'm going to go ahead and mark around the body, so hopefully I can realign the body where it is right now. Now I want to mark the tie-on-eye holes. The belly hook eye too. And the tail hook eye. Before I get too far along, Let me separate one side off and make sure my lines look good. But I also want to mark where I want to put my weight. And I want to drill some holes to key in the glue when I glue all three pieces together. Alright, so that should have it for all the holes I need to drill. I'll mark the spots where these holes got to get drilled. And I'll do the same thing for the other side. So the reason for the 4 holes there are going to be alignment holes, and they'll end up keying in the glue that I'm going to use to glue it all together. So what you end up with is glue filling in those holes and forming solid pins that will not only glue it, but it'll keep it from shifting and make that glue joint a lot stronger. It's almost like having epoxy rivets holding it all together. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and just clean up these holes with a file. Shouldn't take very long. And then I'm going to go ahead and polish these outside edges. And I'm going to do that with some really fine steel wool. It does a pretty nice job all by itself. But then I'll give it a pass on the polishing wheel too. That's going to look good. Let me get both sides done. So I've temporarily put the 2 body halves together. This way I can paint this before we put it together. Now I want to go ahead and make an eye socket on each side. Alright, that'll do. I'm just going to do the other side. Alright, let's do some painting. So I'm not super confident on what colors I should use for lake trout, but from what I can remember when I was a kid fishing for trout up in New Jersey, I remember a lot of purples and blacks and bright yellows. So we'll see what I end up with, but I do want to use some color shifting paints. So that means a black background is usually best. So let's start with the black background. So we'll start off with Testors Opaque Black. So here are the color shift paints. It's kind of hard to choose because they all tend to sort of fade into a rosy burgundy kind of color and a green. And it's always so dependent on how the light hits it. But I'm thinking I want to use one of the darker greens to violet. It's called Evil Forest. I got this set a couple of years ago and I rarely use them. Before I use the color shift paints, I want to put a little bit of this metallic yellow along the lower quarter of the lure, and I'm going to have it fade upwards just a little bit overspray. Wow, I just realized I ran out of opaque white. The only thing I have is metallic white and pearlescent white. So we're going to go with metallic white. But I just want to do that on the very, very bottom. Scale pattern. I'm using my larger scale pattern, hoping that the contrast between the black background and this green shifting paint will give the scales some pop. I'm going to concentrate most of it on the top and let it overspray towards the center and the bottom of the body. Alright, let's see how this comes out. Alright. That looks pretty cool. Again, it's going to be difficult to really capture it in this light. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and add some speckling here because I just want it to have kind of like a little trout speckling on the side. I'm going to use this random shaped stencil. And you can buy these things in little packs of 3. They're not cheap, but they're really handy. I'm pretty sure I've got these things on the Amazon store. If not, I'll go find the best price and put it on there. So I'm going to do it in yellow speckles, then I'll shift it just a little bit and do black speckles. All right, let's switch to black. That looks pretty cool. All right, that looks really cool. I'm gonna go ahead and top the lure off with black as usual. Now I'm going to use a little bit of transparent fuchsia just to give it a little bit of a deeper tone near the bottom. Alright, that looks pretty cool. Now we'll go with some bright red right at the chin. Now I'm going to put an eye on it. I think I'm going to go with red eyes with this one. And then I'm going to give it a couple of good heavy coats of the polyacrylic just to really seal all this paint and protect it while I'm handling it, because I've still got to glue it onto the brass body. And then at the very end we'll clear coat it all with the UV epoxy resin. So I think this is going to be a pretty cool looking lure, but I have to say I haven't felt this unsure about how a lure is actually going to work in a long time. I'm not really sure that this sort of hybrid blade bait is going to work that great. Theoretically, the metal plate should act a lot like a regular blade bait, and the body has a traditional shape of a lipless crankbait, so that combination should create a nice wobble in the water, but we won't know until we try it. This is 5-minute epoxy, but I really would like to have a little extra time. I'm hoping the chilly temperature in this shop is going to slow the set time a little bit. All right, I'm going to fill the little holes I drilled so when they set, they'll all glue together and there'll be like 4 through pins. Get these lined up. All right, I placed them both on there before I turned on the camera. But all I've got to do now is align them and wipe off the excess resin. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and let this set, and then I'll see what else I'll do as far as paint and clear coat. All right, the glue is set, and I got to say, I'm pretty happy with this result. I got a little bit sloppy with the resin on the brass, but that'll have to do. What I'm going to do now is put a little bead of UV resin right along the seam, and I'll set that resin with the smaller UV light. I decided I'm going to clear coat the lure body and the brass plate. So here I'm wiping down the brass with some alcohol. Alright, I'm going to use a really fine brush to get in around the edges and paint the brass. And then I'll come in with a heavier brush for the rest of it. Alright, now we switch to the bigger brush and really goop it on. Alright, I'm going to stick this in here now, and I'm going to let it rotate without the lights on for a little while. I want to make sure it gets nice and level, and any bubbles that are still in there will pop out. Alright, it's been about an hour and a half. Let's take a quick look. Man, that looks amazing. Just the combination of the really shiny brass and that really glossy finish is just amazing. Now I know a lot of you are going to tell me I missed an opportunity to put a rattle in this thing, but I'm not really sure if a rattle would be the right thing for the kind of fishing this thing's going to see. I chose to simplify the build and stick without a rattle. I'm hoping for an action very similar to a lipless crankbait, but just a little more amplitude to that wiggle. Let's put the hooks on and get down to the lake. Well, it's a little later in the day than I thought it was. It got a little too dark to actually get any shots down at the dock. So this is what happens when you're not a full-time YouTuber. The real part of your life has to be attended to. When I get some good morning light before I have to start doing some work, I'll take some photographs of this and I'll put a slideshow together and have it at the end of this video. And I just want to let you guys know next week's video is going to be a subscriber question and answer. And I'm asking anybody who has questions that would like to see those questions answered in a video to go ahead and put questions in the comments, and I'll try to pick some of the most common questions that seem to be important to those folks who are trying to build lures. And don't forget to drop me a like, it really does make a difference. And subscribe and share this stuff with your friends. I'm really trying to get the channel to grow a little faster this year. All right, here's a slideshow.